Earlier you had mentioned, or we were talking about street performing, and we both have some experience doing that. You have much more. I know there's probably a lot of people out there that are wondering, well, I'd like to do it, but can I just go out on the street and do it, or where's a good spot to do it? Can you answer some questions about that?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to talk about really is the type of show that you're going to do, because the streets are generally open. There are different rules in different places, but you do need a sort of family type of show, because you are generally going to have all ages.
Now, when you say that, a lot of people would say, well, what do you mean you're out on the streets? It seems like you would, you wouldn't really necessarily want a family show. You'd want something more edgier.
Yeah, it needs to have some bite to it. Some bite is a good idea, but there's no good offending your audience, because these people are going to pay. They pay after they've seen the show.
Sure.
So you really need to draw them in, and you need to look at the crowd in front of you, and say, this is the audience I've got. How can I best entertain them? So you need a show which is going to be fairly general, and ideally you can play that show a number of different ways, so you can be a bit more hard-hitting and a bit more edgy with it. If you're working a sort of mid-evening show and there's loads of sort of teenagers and young people, and they're a party crowd, then you can begin to go for it a little bit and maybe push the barriers.
So you found in your experience that from doing it from a long time that the best bet is to just have a good family show, so that way you can do it anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, generally speaking, if you've got a solid show which is funny, comedy is essential in a street show. It's no good just standing there and doing clever tricks. You've got to draw people in, and if you want to get money out of an audience, the biggest secret of getting money out of people on the street is they have to have made an emotional commitment to the show. They have to have bought into the show actually at the beginning, and you do that by including them, by talking to them, by literally making them step forward. So they've given something, even if it's just bringing 4 or 5 groups of people forward to make a nice edge that you work to, a nice close edge to start off with. They've bought into the show by actually moving. And every time they answer a question, they've bought into the show a bit more, and they feel...
So when you see performers doing that, saying, hey, take a couple steps forward, it's not really because they want them to be able to see better.
No, nothing to do with that at all. It's to do with actually making that person make a commitment to the show. They've
That's great, because I think a lot of people would never even pick that up.
And that works on trade shows as well. I've just come back from doing a week's trade show down in Vegas. And one of the biggest things in a trade show situation where you've got people walking by, they'll stop and watch from a distance. And as soon as they get bored, or you get to the end of a trick, or something happens, they get distracted, they will walk off. If you can get that person to take 2 paces forward, now you've had a contact with them, and it's harder for them then to leave. And that's true on the street, true in any of those places where you've got a walk-through audience.
That's great. That's a great tip.
Yeah,
that's a hot tip.
Hot tip from Two Pros Talking. 2 pros sitting in a car.
Sitting in a car waiting for it to become spring.
Absolutely. But the street is an amazing place. The best thing I could say about working the street is the opportunity that you get to perform 4, 5, 6 shows a day.
Sure.
And you will not get good more quickly. Is that good English? You will not learn the trade.
Unfortunately, that's perfect English.
You will not learn the trade in any other way other than getting up on stage and working. And if you can find somewhere where you can do street shows, touristy areas are probably the best, because then you've got a lot of people who are there just to relax, just to enjoy themselves. But in any big city, there are areas where you can do street shows. You can do them in parks where there are people hanging around. You've just got to get up there. And you know what? At the end of the day, if you get up there and no one stops, doesn't matter. No one knows. No one's seen it. No one's writing up in a magic book somewhere or in the local newspaper that Fred Bloggs stood up to try and do a show and no one watched. You just go, that didn't work. Let's try another one over there. Let's try another one over there. And you find a pitch. And all of a sudden you find a pitch that works. And when you've got a pitch that works, you can go out there and you can do 7, 8, 12, as many shows a day as you want. And you get into that situation and you will improve so quickly.
Can you give us an example of one of your pitches?
Yeah, well, my main pitch was Covent Garden. And Covent Garden in London had 2 organised pitches at the time, known as the inside pitch and the outside pitch, because one of them was covered. But what you weren't technically allowed to do was what they call fly pitching, which is working around the outside. But we found by experimentation there was one place where we could do a show which technically was off Covent Garden property. So we were actually standing on the local council property, which means the Covent Garden security couldn't move us on. But our crowd was standing on Covent Garden property.
Okay.
And occasionally they'd come and try and disperse the crowd. But if you've got 80, 100 people watching a street show and some security guy comes on...
nobody wants to be the dick.
Exactly. So we did that, so that was great. But that's the whole joy of doing a street show, is actually you can do it anywhere. And I'm not sure what the law is in the United States. In the UK, there are certain laws the police can use to move you on. But if you're not causing any trouble, they don't usually bother. It's only if you look dodgy. If you look like a drug dealer or something like that, then they probably go, we don't like this mess on our streets, and they'll do something about it. But generally speaking, you can perform pretty much anywhere. Here's an interesting point I mentioned on the last one about the structure of a street show. How you don't want to have any tricks which have got an ending, and you want to overlap your tricks. So one trick starts before another one ends, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So there's always the intrigue, and again, that's good logic for a stage show, good logic for a trade show, because it keeps people there. If it comes to an end, they go, I've seen that trick, I can go now and I'm quite happy. So you have to avoid those, and you will learn through performing, through doing street shows, that there are certain points when the audience feel they can walk away, and you get halfway through the show and somehow the audience evaporates. And that happens in a cabaret show as well, only the audience don't evaporate, but you suddenly find you're losing concentration. You get that moment in the show when everyone turns around and goes, oh, do you want another drink? Should we go to the bar? We'll go, and it's that moment as well, and you can learn to eliminate those moments from a show, and you learn that on the street very, very quickly.
Can you, is there any way you can give an example of like a couple
Yeah,
of acts?
I used to open with a chop cup, and I used to go on to a note routine after that. And that was the biggest risky moment, because the chop cup has a very definite ending when you produce the two loads. So what I actually used to do is, before I produced the last load, or before I produced the big loads, I'd do this whole thing about, I'm going to teach you how this trick is done. But if I'm going to teach you how the trick is done, I'm not allowed to do that for magic circle reasons. I get thrown the magic circle, but I'm allowed to sell you the trick. So if you, sir, over there, if you'll actually pretend to lend me a £5 note, what I'll do is I'll actually show that, and I will just pretend that I'm being paid, and then I'm teaching you, and then that doesn't break the magic circle rules. So I'd get this bloke to pretend to give me a £5 note, and I'd put it on the corner of the table. Then I'd do the final loads of the chop cup, which is done as a mock explanation, and then I had his £5 note, which was already in the next trick. So there was already that £5 note hanging there. It was brought into play, which meant I had the crossover. So when I go in to do the bill routine afterwards, it's like, oh, now we've got this, we'll do something with this, and we just flowed in.
Sure.
So there wasn't a fixed end. The audience were going, what's going to happen with that £5 note? You see it?
No, that's perfect.
It's good logic, good logic, good logic.